Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're talking with Anusce Sanai, who is with the Tahirih Justice Center of Greater Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Well, so we met not that long ago, and it was a presentation at Reed Smith by a pro bono attorney who was talking about the refugee work she does across the globe. And you and I met, and I had not heard of the Tahirih Justice Center, and I decided this would be a good time to introduce people in this area to the kinds of work you're doing. It's very timely.
Yes, it is. I think you're absolutely right. So let me tell you a little bit about the Tahirih Justice Center. We are a Baha'i-inspired organization, and it's a national nonprofit that has seen in literally the couple last years a huge growth, and we have been able to reach now a national presence that finally matches our national expertise on certain subjects. The main mission of the organization is to promote equality between men and women through a variety of services that we provide and holistic services. The founder is Layli Miller Muro, who back in 1997 was at the forefront of a landmark case that truly established the pathway for asylum claims based on gender-based violence. Because up to that point, gender-based violence was not contemplated as a ground for seeking asylum protection.
And so tell me, is there a difference between using the word gender-based persecution versus gender-based violence? I saw your founder's TEDx talk, which I highly recommend. It's out online on YouTube. But it talked about gender-based persecution as a basis for asylum.
Yeah, no, it is not a particular difference in terms of significance. Persecution, whether it is done in a form of violence or whether it's done in the form of persecution, such as depriving someone of fundamental rights, is not what makes the difference, right? What makes the difference is the fact that you're deprived of fundamental rights based on the fact that you are a woman. And so up to 1997, it was a ground that was not contemplated by the protections that individuals were afforded here in the United States. And through the matter of Kasinga, this pathway opened up, and it truly set a precedent for the ability of women who had experienced violence, across the globe to be able to seek that protection here. And because of the attention that the case drew back in the days, a book was also written entitled Do They Hear You When You Cry? And from the proceeds of that book, Layli Miller Muro was able to then really open the organization. And since 1997, we have served more than 17,000 women and girls. These are all immigrant women and girls who were able to be protected because of the laws here in the United States that afford that protection.
So some of the things that fall under this umbrella would be things like child marriage.
Also, those could be some, but most of the time, the types of cases that we see are immigrant women and girls who are fleeing gender-based violence either from their home country or in partnerships. So they may be married or they may be in, again, romantic relationships in which there is abuse taking place. There are also scenarios in which an immigrant is a victim of a crime in the United States independently, whether they are connected to the perpetrators or not. And that particular crime also gives a pathway to a potential remedy. So, and that is the type of work we do. That's why we always reference to our services as holistic, because it's not just legal services that we provide. We provide also social services, and we are extremely involved in policy and advocacy work, because the mission of creating a more just system or better access to system must also contemplate changes that happen at the legislative level. And so we have a policy department that is specifically involved with pushing legislations or reinforcing legislations or maintaining the status quo of certain legislations that we currently have, so to continue to give access to the justice system to our clients.
So you are doing a huge job that has just gotten bigger and bigger in the last several years. There's more people seeking asylum, and there's more barriers being put up to asylum. But you've grown from the greater DC area. You now have five locations.
Correct. We have 5 locations. We have one in Baltimore, Maryland. We have one in Houston, Texas, San Francisco, California. Atlanta, Georgia is our latest, and we're very excited to be able to bring our services to that area as well. And then greater DC, which is located here in Falls Church. Each of our location replicates pretty closely the model that was started in greater DC. And what I mean by that is that in each location you have a legal team, you have a social services team, and then you have development. And then on the national level, what we reference to as the headquarters, which are also located in Falls Church, we have policy work and our operations department as well.
So you've got a fairly small staff for the work that you're doing in the greater DC area, but part of the efficacy of the center's work is your pro bono attorneys, of which there are like how many, 1,400?
Yes, I'm very glad that you mentioned that, because it would be neglectful of me if I were not to really bring the pro bono network into the picture, because if it weren't for the generosity and the support that we receive from this network of 1,400 plus pro bonos, we will not be able to serve the numbers of women and girls that we serve every year. And we pride ourselves of the relationship that we have with the pro bonos, because it's not a referral system. It's not us placing cases with individuals, with pro bonos who may be interested in handling, for example, an asylum case. We become their co-counsels. So we become collaborators. We become team members. And together we walk a path that is very intimidating, because the immigration legal system is extremely complicated. And there are regulations that are tedious and very specific. And so we walked with them by co-counseling a case together. And at the end of the day, what drives our want to work for a client is the same passion, because the pro bonos, on top of their 9 to 5, they're dedicating their time to Tahirih to be able to elevate the voices of our clients and allow them access to justice.
So how do you find the clients, or rather, how do the clients find you? Because I know that on your website you talk about the fact that it's very low percentage of people who are unrepresented who actually get asylum. It's about 47% or something if they have an attorney. But it's in the 90 percentile if they're working with you.
Yeah, correct. And so the truth be told, word of mouth is what is how we get clients. That is one of the ways. The other ways is, in this area we have incredible like-minded organizations that do very similar work, and we all partner together. And so we are specifically experts in gender-based claims within the umbrella of immigration law. And so because we're seen as experts, there are referrals that come to us from like-minded organizations that know the work we do. So that's a second way. A lot of time is as simple as a Google search. And so we do have individuals that literally do a Google search. And then many times even immigration agencies, especially those that operate at the borders, will have to provide individuals who arrive in the United States with a list of remedies or where they could find help, and we're listed on those booklets information, which I should say they're not necessarily provided by the immigration authorities, but there are the like-minded organizations on the ground that have pushed for these initiatives, so that the individuals that do arrive that have the right to seek help here in the United States can avail themselves of all the information. And so there are also those sources that allows them to find us.
So here in Virginia, I think, do we have one major detention facility? Is that the one in Farmville where everybody's pretty much sent?
Yes.
Things are changing fairly rapidly, or so I gather, both at the Department of Justice federally, but just I think we see changes in Fairfax County. I think we're seeing changes across the state. How do you keep up with how fast hurdles are put up, or how fast they're trying to restrict access to some of these people who need your help?
Yeah, it's a very sensitive question, I would say, because we work closely with our policy department, who monitors obviously all these different changes, and not so much for the purposes of just expressing our concerns and truly engaging in the drafting of briefs or petitions that may need to be put out, but also to inform the attorneys that are representing clients of any legal changes that may jeopardize some of the cases that we have, because procedures may change, rules may change, or the status quo may change. And you probably know that there is an incredibly large backlog of immigration cases across the country. And so if you are someone who has been waiting for years to get an adjudication, and then the rules change on you and you're told to wait 5 more years, there's very little that we can do except for showing how is that impacting the voice of a survivor of domestic violence.
Yeah, and I have some experience with that, because I'm involved with a young friend whose family has been here for years, and they still have another hearing to go through, and there's a lot of anxiety around it, there's a lot of unknowns around it, but the other thing is the ability to be able to work, the ability to be able to go to college. Right. Once you've bumped up against that and you are involved with someone who's experiencing that, it's a whole different thing from just hearing the numbers, and I think people don't understand really how long it takes.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason why our work is so important, because we try to break stereotypes and also remove blanket statements that are sometimes made, to truly identify the individuals that are facing the most consequences out of the changes of rules, from finding their voices.
Well, and I think that's so important. I think people connect to stories over statistics. And when we come back from our break, we're going to be talking with Adriana López about some of the stories and some of the needs that have to be met when people actually get to this country seeking asylum. It's more than just an attorney. So when we come back from the break, please join me as we find out more about the Tahirih Justice Center.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, Hard, what's this? That's my resignation. You're resigning? Why? You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit. Oh, I forgot. I'll do better. Please don't quit on me.
Don't let your heart quit on you. Get your uncontrolled high blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late.
So you can't save money? That's easy as pie. Brown bagging lunch instead of going out. $6 save times 5 days a week times 10 years is $21,000. That's a lot of lettuce. Small changes today, big bucks tomorrow. Feedthepig.org.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally.
I did. Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls. But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that strollers have the right of way on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep, I did. Did you guys
Did you know that kids who eat breakfast have higher GPAs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to say.
Did you know babies should never touch silver? It's really bad for them.
I knew that.
Did you guys know that statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected.
I'm mind putting that on my blog?
I just put it in mine.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. We are talking with the Tahirih Justice Center tonight, and in this segment we're talking with Adriana López, who is the Social Services Program Manager. Welcome to the show, Adriana.
Thank you for having us.
So once people actually get here and they've got counsel and they're under the umbrella of the Justice Center, there's a lot of things that need to happen, especially because a lot of these folks, a lot of these women are coming from a place of trauma.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'd like to start really briefly by describing some of the forms of abuse that our clients have gone through. That can include domestic violence, rape, trafficking, labor trafficking, sex trafficking, forced marriage. And so there's a wide variety of forms of abuse that they have experienced. So by the time that they come to my program, most of these clients are the type of clients that have a lot of urgent needs that will need a lot of intensive case management. We know it is well documented that survivors of gender-based violence are significantly more vulnerable to short and long-term negative health outcomes, whether that is because of the injuries that they have gone through because of the physical abuse, depression, chronic health concerns, post-traumatic stress disorder. We know that women who have experienced violence are also 3 times more likely to develop gynecological issues, and that the violence is also associated with negative health outcomes for mothers and infants. And so I can say with confidence that by the time they reach my program, these are women who have gone through a lot and who will need a lot of support. So because of that trauma, because Tahirih was able to recognize that, it is essential that we provide a holistic model that extends beyond just including the legal services, which is a critical component, but then really providing additional safety nets so that our clients can reach safety and begin to thrive in their communities. So some of the services that we are able to provide our clients with are connecting them to medical services, medical debt forgiveness programs. We also help connect them to food pantries, emergency housing, English and vocational training, employment opportunities. I think that sometimes people don't realize, but some of our clients were practicing professionals in their field. And so when they come to us, they have questions about how to validate their degrees in the United States. And so that is something that we help them with. In addition, we do extensive safety planning if they need it. We also provide supportive counseling in-house, do mental health assessments, and provide referrals if our clients are experiencing intensive clinical needs. And so every story is different, every journey is different, but we really make sure in our social services department that we work hand in hand with our legal team, and we provide the type of support that our clients need.
Well, that's fantastic. And we're fortunate here. I don't know about your other locations around the country, because I know you're in Atlanta, you're in Houston and San Francisco, but I work with a lot of nonprofits here in the greater DC area. So for things like English as a second language, transitional housing, health clinics that are free health clinics. All of these we are a very resource-rich area.
Yes, absolutely.
So your job is basically taking each individual. I'm assuming housing has to be a huge need, and healthcare and mental health care. So your work is really about collaborating.
Yes, absolutely. Developing partnerships, and I think that's a critical component to the work that we do, is always being in the community, doing outreach, doing trainings with our community members that we serve, and then also partners and advocates in the field. And we see this as important work because some of our referrals, as my colleague was earlier mentioning comes from these network of advocates that we collaborate with. And so I, for example, have a client right now who is a survivor of both labor and sex trafficking. She, when she was in high school, received assistance from her school teacher and her school nurse, who identified that she needed support because she was doing self-harm as a result of the abuse that she had experienced. This client was able to receive mental health services, but unfortunately later on was re-victimized by her partner, who became physically and emotionally abusive. And it wasn't until she was at an emergency shelter with her 1-year-old, when a mental health provider who knew about our services, knew about the types of relief that she would be able to qualify, finally made a referral to our program. And so we really rely on our partners as well to pass on the information, and we believe that being out in the community means one more person can get the support that they need to reach safety.
So that you raise a very interesting question, which is a lot of victims oftentimes will not seek law enforcement assistance or healthcare assistance simply because they're here illegally, right? And they don't know the process for actually applying for asylum. I mean, people don't come here knowing that.
Exactly. So for us, again, it's really important that we provide trainings and education. I think one of the challenges right now in our social services department is the fact that even though our undocumented clients come with a lot of trauma because of the violence that they've experienced, they are limited in the types of services that they can actually access because of their status. But we try to be very creative and collaborate with other partners who provide low cost to no cost services so that they can access the support that they need. And then I think the other challenge that we've identified that I believe has been exacerbated by the current political climate in terms of immigration is really the lack of information or misinformation that is out there in terms of the types of services that different types of immigrants can access. And so again, being out in the community, partnering with folks, being on coalitions, which really drives a lot of the advocacy efforts that Tahirih is engaged with both in the local and national level.
Right, and there are so many, you mentioned school teachers. That's one place where I think, and I'm speaking just for Fairfax County, where I know a lot of the school board members in the schools, and I work with organizations that are in the schools. A lot of these children are traumatized simply because they are not sure what's going to happen. They're frightened of, and that's not just the students who are in the immigrant community, it's their classmates who are being traumatized by this uncertainty of what will happen to their friends.
Yes, vicarious trauma. And so it's important to again, be out there. I think one of the things that we are working with right now is in Northern Virginia, reaching out to schools. We also have a medical advocacy program that we are a part of, where we are reaching out to medical service providers to really highlight what our clients are going through, ways to provide support, ways to even recognize the forms of abuse and the signs, so that if someone comes into your office or your clinic, that people are able to hand over information about Tahirih Justice Center. And so we see that as something very critical. In addition to the medical advocacy program, we also have other ways that perhaps your audience members can become engaged with our social services work, which is the mentorship program. We have realized, as I was talking about earlier today, that some of our clients have a profession. They were business owners back in their country. They had degrees, and so they are now trying to become economically independent in the United States and in this new context. And one of the things that we want to do is partner mentors from the community who have gone through this process, who are aware of the systems in place in this country, so that our clients can perhaps get information about how how to navigate college applications, FAFSA if they qualify for it, scholarships. We've also seen that some of our clients have children and teens who are in high school who might be thinking about college education opportunities, and so we see it as imperative that they get connected to mentors who can connect them to summer camps, to leadership opportunities, and who can start talking to them about what does it mean to go to college in the United States. That would be a success story that we're very excited about this program.
So how would mentors get in contact? So I'm assuming that you need mentors of every variety, that people shouldn't think, well, I don't know if I have something to offer, because pretty much everybody has something to offer.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure there's no such thing as too many mentors either.
No.
So how would people contact you, or what is sort of the pathway to becoming a mentor?
Yes, so definitely visiting our website. We have information on there about our office, asking for Adriana López. I'm the one in charge of the mentorship program. We do some trainings for mentors. Oftentimes, mentors become, a go-to for our clients, and so kind of providing guidance in terms of what are the roles, what kind of support, if this happens, who do you talk to? So really narrowing down on the scope of and the role of the mentor. We also have, for those clients who may feel, or for those audience members who may feel like they may not have a lot to offer, if mentorship is too big of a commitment, we also have volunteer opportunities, whether that is updating our resources guide, so that when our client comes and they need a specific type of services, we can quickly access and provide information and referral. We also have support group where we are constantly, interested in child volunteers who can provide child care opportunities. Yes.
So important.
And just translating documents. So I think there's a wide variety of different ways that individuals can become involved in our program specifically.
And I like to remind people all the time that everybody can do something.
Yes.
Everybody can do something. Sometimes we sell ourselves short if we don't think we have a specific, but you just need people.
Yes.
And you need people to do simple things, because again, and I think I mentioned this in the first segment, you have a very small staff for the number of people that you serve.
Yes.
And so without mentors and volunteers and your network, it would be very difficult.
And for our clients who have their journey has been so long, to come to our program and be able to see the type of support system that we offer, something so small can mean a lot, because they are navigating difficult systems.
Absolutely. It's the smallest gestures that make the biggest impact.
Yes.
I agree with you on that. When we come back from our break, we're going to be talking with Casey Carter Swegman. She is also with the Tahirih Justice Center. So please join us after the break. Thank you so much, Adriana, for having joined us to tell us about the ways in which our viewers can get involved with the services you provide.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip at AOL.com.
Here, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Tonight we are talking with some formidable women from the Tahirih Justice Center. Joining me this segment is Casey Carter Swegman. She is the Forced Marriage Initiative Project Manager for the Justice Center.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
So help me to understand the definition of forced marriage. How do you see that? What qualifies as a forced marriage, and what is it in all of its form as it relates to people seeking asylum?
Sure, absolutely. So I think it's important to understand the distinction between forced and arranged marriage, and also to understand that forced marriage unfortunately really is happening here in the US. And so the definition that we use at the Tahirih Justice Center is that a forced marriage is one in which either one or both parties cannot or do not consent to the marriage, and they often face all sorts of psychological abuse, mental abuse, and threats of physical abuse, and sometimes tragically quite severe physical abuse to get them to acquiesce or to say yes to a marriage that they don't want, oftentimes to a partner that they don't know. And we see this occurring sort of across the board, across communities and cultures and religions. And it's also important to understand that distinction that I mentioned earlier between arranged and forced marriage. At Tahirih, we do not equate the two. We see arranged marriage as a process that can be successful.
It's cultural. You know, there's a lot. I know people who have been in arranged marriages, and it's an agreement.
Exactly.
Right? And it's part of a cultural process.
Throughout the process, your preferences for timing and for partner are respected, and there are not consequences for, let's say, changing your mind or wanting to go in a different direction, then that is an arranged marriage where someone still feels they have the control, right? They're in the driver's seat. But once you feel like you are not in the driver's seat and that you fundamentally do not have the right to say no or the right to refuse anymore, that's really where we find.
And where does age come into that? Does a 13-year-old really have agency in that decision?
So that is a really tricky question. I think a lot of times in the US, we think, you know, child marriage isn't happening here, that's a problem overseas, and unfortunately it really does happen here in quite large numbers. And as you are probably well aware, and many folks might be out there as well, but minors have very limited legal rights. They have very limited access to resources. So if a minor is facing the pressure to marry coming from her parents, her extended community, maybe even religious leaders and others, her options for help seeking are very, very limited. The Constitution really does defer to parental rights in most instances, and in lots of states, parental consent can lower the minimum age of marriage well below the age of 18, and in some states there is no age floor. And what we see tragically in our cases is that parental consent is actually a cover for parental coercion.
Right, and I mean, and that is happening. So you did amazing work here in Virginia. A lot of times Virginia's on the bottom of a lot of lists. But here we led the way. I mean, and the Justice Center had a lot to do. Your advocacy work had a lot to do with pushing forward the legislation in 2016 that was signed into law that said you can't consent to marriage except there's some very narrow parameters unless you're 18.
That's right, and we are very, very proud of that bill, and I can talk a little bit about that process. And so in 2016, as you already mentioned, we were looking pretty closely at the data. What we know now is that between the year 2000 and the year 2015, in the US, over 200,000 minors were married. So this is not a small problem. It's not just a drop in the bucket. It's pretty pervasive, and it's happening in all 50 states. And it's really important to us to also dispel that myth that it's maybe just two 17-year-olds, Romeo and Juliet scenarios, high school sweethearts that want to marry. Across the board, that is unfortunately not the dynamic. What we see are minor girls being married to adult men, sometimes with age differences that are very disturbing, and with pregnancies that would actually trigger criminal charges for statutory rape had a judge or a clerk not rubber stamped that situation with a marriage certificate. And so We drilled down more specifically on our Virginia stats, saw that every year hundreds of minor girls in Virginia were being married, again, the majority of the time marrying adult men, and that was because we had these parental consent exceptions and pregnancy exceptions, and just a clerk at a window there looking at paperwork, and if you had your parent's signature and a doctor's note that said you were pregnant, no one was actually asking that minor, do you want to be married? And I had clients tell me that they were standing there crying, and clerks would just sort of assume those were wedding day jitters or tears of joy.
That is so terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, so terrible for a young person not to feel like anyone's going to come save them.
That's right, and I think a lot of people assume that that courthouse is that last moment where a person could reach out for help, or someone might ask the right questions. And we're lucky now in Virginia that is the case. And so we looked at this data in 2016 and we thought, why not start right here at home, right? Our flagship office is in Falls Church, Virginia. Let's see if we can get support to raise the minimum age of marriage to 18, where someone is empowered with the rights of an adult, and if they want to go to shelter, they can walk right out that door and get services from a shelter. Where below that age, you're gonna be hard pressed to get a shelter to open their doors to you without a lot of advocacy or an attorney. And so what we did was pitch our bill and sort of shopped it around and got two amazing sponsors, bipartisan and bicameral. And so we had Jill Vogel in the House and Jennifer McClellan in the Senate. And through hours and hours of legislative drafting and coalition building with religious groups and other organizations on both sides of the aisle, we did get our legislation passed. And so marriage in the state of Virginia is now reserved for legal adults only. The minimum age is 18, with very narrow exceptions for 17-year-olds who do want to be emancipated for the purposes of marriage. And to go through that process, you have to go before a judge who is trained on the issue, who will ask you questions, who will probe into child abuse histories and other records, and hopefully get to a point where they understand that the minor is capable of making such a decision on their own and is not facing coercion. And so that courthouse as being a place of detection and support and protection really is the scenario now in Virginia, and we were the first state to pass a law to do that, and that was really, really thrilling for us, and we're seeing just a snowball effect from there. We've had legislation that we primarily drafted in Texas, went through and was signed by the governor last year. Same in New York. Kentucky just passed an amazing bill, and Delaware sent a bill to the governor's desk just today to set a bright line of 18 with no exceptions for the minimum age of marriage. So the work that Tahirih did to pass that law really set into motion an incredible campaign to protect children from forced marriage in this country, and we couldn't be more proud of that.
You know, and a lot of times people do think that there are things that happen in foreign countries that are not the United States. Mm-hmm. Child marriage is one of them. Female genital mutilation is another one, and human trafficking, although I think more and more people understand human trafficking is a major problem here, not just abroad or internationally.
Absolutely.
But all these things, these circumstances feed into the work that you do and in the women and girls you're trying to help.
Absolutely, and I think what we typically say in a training when we're doing outreach and education, which is something we do not just in Virginia, but nationally and internationally now, we often liken where we are now as a movement in educating people about the fact that forced marriage happens here to the trafficking movement about 10 years ago, when you would bring it up and people would say, there's just no way that that happens in the US, you must be talking about some foreign country. That is still somewhat the response that we get nowadays when we bring up forced marriage. And I think in 10 years, there'll be, thanks to us and several other organizations working on this issue, hopefully a very different services landscape, a very different legal landscape where there are the same types of unique and well-tailored specific protections in place the way they are for trafficking victims now.
Yeah, and female genital mutilation is also a problem in this country, California, Minnesota, Texas, and Virginia too. I've actually done a show and with a survivor of that. It's very difficult to get people to focus on that because they think it does not happen here.
Absolutely.
But and again, how do you seek assistance? Because they're doing that younger and younger, and so how does an 8-year-old seek help from adults when it's the adults around you that are perpetrating the violence?
That's right. It's very, very hard for young people, whether they're facing female genital mutilation or forced marriage, to find the right person to confide in and the right person to reach out to. And I think one of the things we also try and raise in our trainings and our education and in all of our materials that are available online are the ways in which female genital mutilation and cutting can intersect with forced marriage. Because in communities that practiced female genital mutilation and cutting, if there is also a forced marriage happening, it's important to ask that survivor, whether they come forward about the FGMC or about the forced marriage, about the other form of harm. Because a forced marriage could be a red flag to you that that individual may have experienced FGMC in their lifetime when they were very young and might have unmet medical needs, mental health needs that have not yet been addressed because no one's asked them that question about FGMC. Likewise, if someone comes forward to talk about a threat of FGMC or a history of FGMC, you might want to also ask about maybe a future threat of forced marriage because of the way in which FGMC is typically used in some communities to prepare a girl for marriage or to make her quote unquote marriageable in the future. And so we really try and emphasize the intersection of those two issues so that a woman or girl who comes forward for either gets wraparound services for both.
And what about honor killings? I mean, are people coming to this country fleeing that? I don't know how prevalent that is, but I think there are instances where people are trying to seek not just harm from a partner, but from their own families.
And that is a very sort of difficult topic to talk about and to parse out. In our work, we have certainly seen women and girls who are facing the threat of a forced marriage face death threats. We have heard stories in the media where women have been killed by their families for their refusal, and you know, we see that as similar to domestic homicide, right? We see women in America day in and day out killed by abusive partners, right? And these are the same types of dynamics of refusing to go along with what someone else might prescribe for you, or angering someone who is abusive and that resulting in a homicide. It happens across communities and cultures, and while it can be the result of a refusal of a forced marriage, it can also be the result of an intimate partner violence situation right here in the US. So we see those dynamics as quite similar.
Yeah, and so, you know, this is really the full range that it all comes down to. It's about equality for women.
That's right.
It's about equality for women, and so we're looking for that, you know, in so many ways, equal pay for equal work, so, you know, on so many fronts. But this is the situation where you are, is that women are put in danger, in harm's way, and it's a threat to their health and to their lives.
That's right. I mean, a woman or girl who is forced into marriage is likely facing a lifetime of sustained and severe abuse, right? The abuse that is used to get her to acquiesce and to capitulate to something she doesn't want is lifelong, and then the moment of marriage itself is abusive, and then most of the behaviors that follow are also abuse. It is kind of obvious to us as advocates, but a lot of people still don't put this together, but any sexual intercourse that occurs within a non-consensual marriage is non-consensual and therefore rape. And a lot of advocates are just now putting that together. And so it is a lifetime of harm that you are submitting a woman or girl to when she is forced into marriage. And I think another good point that you made is that this form of harm really does not discriminate. I have served 13-year-old girls who were not allowed to go to school, and I have served 30-year-old women who work for high-paying DC contractors, and none of their employees know what their home situation is. And so cuts across religions. I've served individuals from the Christian patriarchy movement. There are survivors from the FLDS, ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist. And so it's really important to know that this can affect anyone, anywhere, and to just have our eyes open.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing this with us, Casey. This is important information that I think a lot of viewers probably have never heard before. So when we come back from our break, it will be the final segment with Tahirih Justice Center. We'll be talking with Anusce, Sanai again. So please join us when we come back.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rip-off money. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water. At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site. That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff. You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People! The flood is imminent!
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and we are talking to Anusce Sanai from the Tahirih Justice Center. Thank you again for being here. I loved your team. Everybody is just so on point and so passionate about the work they are doing. Like, go team.
Yes, good, seriously.
So from 1997, you had a founder with an idea who basically has grown this to 5 locations around the nation. And there's a lot of moving parts, but something doesn't scale like that unless you have a lot of support from underneath.
For sure, for sure. So we pride ourselves for the business model that we replicate in all these different locations. We have an extremely diversified source of funding, and it's obviously done purposefully so that we don't put all our eggs in one basket.
As any good nonprofit knows.
Exactly, exactly. But what does that look like? We have fundings coming from government, from grants, from foundations, and then also private donors that can take the shape of corporations like Visa, Capital One, Hilton.
Those are some big name
very
partners.
Big name, and and they're. Please forgive me, like I don't have them all listed or all memorized, but there's a lot of them. But also a lot of the law firms in the DC area, law firms like Reed Smith, Aiken Gump, Arnold and Porter, which was actually the starting firm with our founder at the very, very beginning in 1997. So this is a list not for the purpose of just thanking all the supporters, but also to show how many individuals from different walks of life and backgrounds are committed to the work that we do. And it's because of their constant support that we're able to continue. Because as the landscape changes, as the political landscape changes, the needs of our clients also changes. As you have heard earlier, my colleague saying, we're dealing with a forced marriage issue right now in the United States that it's equivalent to trafficking 10 years ago, right? And so the landscape, it's constantly changing. Needs are constantly arising. And for those purposes, we do need to find ways to increase our ability to provide legal services and social services.
We have a call from Gary from Falls Church. And so I think what Gary wants to know further is how many individual donors are also part of this. I know you've got a gala coming up this Friday, as a matter of fact. So how do individual donors factor into this?
We have a lot of individual donors that provide us support on a monthly basis, annual basis, and have been providing it for years. Our annual gala that you mentioned is probably our most anticipated event of the year because it brings together all our supporters in one location to celebrate, but also to come to reality and really continue the conversation about how to elevate the voices of our courageous clients. And so this year, the gala will take place at the Marriott Marquis on May 11th, which is a Friday, and tickets are still available. So if any of your listeners would like to join us, would like to be entertained, we do have a multi-platinum singer-songwriter Andrew Grammer coming. who's going to provide the entertainment. But even more exciting is Adama Iwo, who is was named Person of the Year by Time Magazine, and she is at the forefront of various movements to give voice to women and what we have experienced. And so we're very excited to bring all these big personas to the
and I think
gala.
that's a nice, so you got Andy Grammer coming, which is great. You've got Times Person of the Year coming, which is amazing. But it's probably the client stories that really, because I know I work with a lot of nonprofits, and that's, you put your clients out there to talk about the life-changing impact. That is what moves people to say, we have to do something. Like, I need to have skin in the game, which is what I find so remarkable about these corporate partners, that they feel like we need to have an investment in doing this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And our gala is an opportunity to hear the courageous voice, which is usually one of the clients that is given the platform to share her story. And this is more of a personal reflection. I wish we could sit here and truly share all the various stories of all the clients that we serve, because each client deserves that platform. Obviously, you can imagine for reasons of confidentiality and safety, we're not able to do so. But I think that if those who are interested were to take a pause and really come and educate themselves and see the work that we do, a lot of the misinformation that is put out there will dissipate, because it is not about defining what is mine and what's yours and what you should have as access or not. It truly is continuing the conversation of establishing a just system and having everybody access it.
Absolutely. And you do have a YouTube channel, and your YouTube channel is great. It's easy to find, and you have very brave women who have told their stories in a very compelling way. I mean, the violence, I think it's 1 in 3 women. I mean, the statistics are amazing, but it's the stories that people tell about the violence that they are fleeing that make you understand that there is no options for a lot of the women, and that's why people take the risks they do.
Exactly. And the dynamics of violence, it's a very complicated dynamic. It is never as clear-cut as it is happening, therefore I will leave. It has several ramifications. It has obviously traumatic impact on the person, and then if children are involved, in children as well, right? And so it is important to bring this education to the public so that, again, we can shatter stereotypes that are usually surrounding domestic violence. And one way that we do this is also by providing to the public at large, but also to the immigrant community specifically, trainings and workshops that we usually refer to as Know Your Rights. And this is another great opportunity for anyone who wishes to support our work to get involved, because during the Know Your Rights presentation, we educate the public on the rights of an immigrant. Again, you may not know, and people may not know, that just because someone may not have papers to be here in the United States does not deprive them of rights, of fundamental rights that we as Americans pride ourselves, that our Constitution gives and affords to everybody.
Everyone.
Exactly. And so through the Know Your Rights presentation is where we can connect the dots and really bring the topic to full circle to show individuals that at the end of the day, we're all human beings and we do have access to certain rights, and we should be given those rights.
So you do a wonderful job, and everybody who's been here tonight's done a wonderful job. If people want a presentation at their service club, I'm a Rotarian, we frequently have people come to talk to our Rotary Club. You have a very compelling story to tell that I think would really resonate with a lot of Rotarians, because we do international work. And we're eradicating polio, and we're eradicating malaria. And so you're very small. Again, I keep referring to the fact you've got a very small staff, but a very large network. I mean, is there a possibility for people to connect and get a speaker out to an event so that people can experience this firsthand?
Absolutely, anytime. We have, again, depending on the interest, you know, if it is something that is more legal services oriented, we can definitely provide trainings or even just presentations as to the work we do, the various legal remedies that we find ourselves working, social services. The Forced Marriage Initiative can talk about their forced marriage initiative services, because we do have also a forced marriage associate that works with clients that call, you know, to seek help for forced marriages purposes, and it involves extreme complicated safety planning, and also sometimes extraction from other countries, and then connecting various players in order to bring someone to safety. So we do have all these topics that are available for presentations. Wonderful. And all that needs to be done is to contact us. Okay. So you have 3 names right now, and so any of us can definitely be contacted. We do have our communication department, which operates more at a national level. So if there is an interest for anybody in the audience on a more larger scale, we're able to accommodate that as well. And again, if you want to see a glimpse of the work that we do, and most importantly, celebrate with us the courage of our clients and the network of pro bonos that support us, come May 11 at the Marquee and celebrate with us. It's going to be a wonderful gala.
I think so, and I think when you are in spaces like that with other people who are already invested, that's where you find out and you hear people's stories about how they got involved. Because, you know, we keep talking about sort of global situations, but there are things that happen here domestically. So it's not it's here or it's there, it's everywhere. And so you're basically taking anyone who comes to you and trying to help them. Yeah, and if I may, you know, on that particular point, I would just encourage people, your listeners, anybody, not to be fearful. This is not a topic that should be feared. This is a topic that should invite conversation, and it's a topic that needs to be explored, and it needs to be supported, because it is truly through understanding what are the challenges that survivors of violence face that then we can work together in finding a solution. It is a way for us to put aside political differences to truly create a network that elevates the voices of a survivor, because they deserve it. Oh, I agree. And the only way to get equality for women is to shut down the exploitation of women. And so those two things have to work hand in hand. We will never get equality while we allow exploitation to happen unchecked. And it happens in our communities whether we see it or not. Human trafficking, like I said, is really raised up. We had a speaker at my Rotary Club on human trafficking. People are now suddenly more aware to notice things, ask more questions. Teachers are, counselors are, doctors are, faith communities are, like, how can you look for signs and ask the right questions to get the kind of help people need? Absolutely. And, you know, again, if anybody wants to be involved, there's a variety of ways to support our organization, to really help us and to walk with us in this path. Well, and I appreciate you coming and kind of sharing that with us, Anusce. Thank you very much. And I'm sure people can find your information online. Yes. This has been so informative. You know, I fully support what you're doing, and I hope a lot of our viewers do too. Thank you so much for having joined us tonight. Please go online, find out more information about the important work that's being done by the Tahirih Justice Center.